Something that can become quite challenging for a lot of us is refraining from inserting our own thoughts, beliefs, and worldviews onto others. There's something about human nature where when we find something that we think works for us, we think is the answer, we think is the truth, we all of a sudden, typically unconsciously, try to then convince others of this path that we are walking on. If we've discovered some sort of an epiphany, some new habit or spiritual practice, some grand realization that fundamentally changes our life, it's very rare that we'll just kind of silently mind our own business and keep on the path that we're on. Oftentimes, when we find a differing or a contrasting viewpoint, we'll have this urge to try to correct others, to try to show them the way, sometimes out of sympathy, sometimes out of habit, oftentimes out of an egoic desire to be proven right. But as tempting as this sounds, and as easy as it is to sometimes fall into this trap, we have to be mindful of how our interactions with others ultimately unfold. You see, life is ultimately an experience, a dance, something that we are meant to experience both alone, but more importantly, together. And the only way that we can all live and learn and grow from one another harmoniously is if we have the tolerance, the patience, the respect, and the open mindedness to listen to another's point of view. There's a story that I came across recently, I believe from Jiddu Krishnamurti, where he talks about a monkey and a fish. Now, one day, this monkey, they're in the jungle, very young monkey, hasn't really reached maturity yet, is swinging along the branches and suddenly stumbles upon a pond. And in this pond, he sees this small fish kind of struggling just above the surface of the water. It's kind of flapping its fins, it's going up, then going down. And the monkey, because of its immaturity, thinks that the fish is drowning. And so it picks the fish up and puts it on a branch. As we all might imagine, after a few minutes, the fish unfortunately passes away. And the monkey is bewildered. He thought that he was helping the fish out. But as we all know, fish can only live underwater. They have special gills that allow them to breathe under the surface, under the water. Now, this beautiful story is an analogy to us in many respects. Oftentimes, we are like the monkey, thinking that, well, because I breathe oxygen and because I need to live above water, then everything else around me and everyone else around me needs to do the same thing. But had the monkey achieved a level of maturity, a level of understanding, he would have realized that, all the creatures of this world, all the people of this world interact and get by differently. And it's about respecting and honoring their own unique path. Unfortunately, however, many of us are like the monkey. We think we're helping someone, but in actuality, we're actually hurting them. We're making them kind of bend to our will, bend to our way of looking at the world, but life doesn't work that way. Just as there are as many people in the world, there are as many ways to progress in this life, to connect with God, to be one with one's true essence or true self. And I know this is hard for a lot of people to accept. Truth be told, it was hard for me to accept as I was growing up, as I was sort of finding my way in the endless ocean of spirituality. I thought that there was one truth, one way, one path. And although I don't disagree with that notion, I'm also realizing that there are different shades to the one truth, the one way, the one path. And I'm fully comfortable acknowledging that I don't know everything. In fact, I do not know everything. And that's why I yearn connection and connectivity with others, because everyone has something to teach me. Everyone has something that can open my eyes, that can sort of lend a different perspective, that might, put me on a different path altogether. When I started out, I was definitely much more rigid. And I think a lot of this stemmed from my own insecurity to be wrong, to feel like my existence was not panning out the way that I wanted it to be. So I desperately craved for some version of the truth, not realizing that there are many versions to this story. Later on, I realized that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to change course. It's part of the natural evolution of human beings, right? Otherwise, we can't grow. Otherwise, we can't do something different. I think it was Einstein that said that, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different result. I think by that definition, most of us would probably fall under the category of being insane. So it's about constantly challenging ourselves to think differently, to look differently, to see the world in a whole new light. Because ultimately we have nothing to lose, right? The truth is not something that once you grab it, everything else after that is false. It constantly evolves. If you think about it, it's kind of like a camera, right? And there's sort of a cover that's blocking the aperture through which the image can be taken. And through each stage of life, that cover is being removed and that aperture is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're able to focus and process and see so much more of reality. We're able to comprehend so much more than we did in our earlier years. And so I think that's why it's so important to reflect on, how are we interacting with others? Are we telling them the right thing? Or are we just following what we think is right? There's this story that I would often hear a lot, growing up as a Muslim, following kind of the Muslim path. Uh, there's this story that I learned as a young adult, and it's kind of stuck with me. Through my spiritual evolution, it stuck with me. And I think it fits so perfectly into this theme of not imposing your viewpoints onto others. But the story is actually about Moses. And Moses was walking through the fields one night, and he comes across this shepherd. And he overhears this shepherd talking presumably to himself. But as he gets closer to the shepherd and hears what is being said, Moses realizes that the shepherd is not talking to himself, but rather is talking to God. And he's taken aback by the language and the mannerisms that the shepherd is conveying. He's saying things like, God, I wish I could braid and massage and oil your hair. Oh God, I wish I can massage your shoulders and remove the tension off your feet. I wish I could remove the lice from your head. Things that normally one would not associate when having a communion with God. And so Moses was so taken aback by this, as the story goes. In fact, he was extremely upset. And he accosted the shepherd and said, "What are you doing?" And the shepherd was taken aback, not realizing what he had done. And Moses explained to him, look, God is the Almighty. God is above anything you or I or anyone else can ever imagine. And how can you talk to him in such a manner that he's one of us, that he's a human, that he walks among us? God is greater than our comprehension. He's greater than the limits of the human body. You should not pray or worship to God in this manner. And so the shepherd felt very sheepish, felt very embarrassed, and went off on his own path. And in that moment, when Moses was alone, the story tells us that God confronted Moses and chided him for discouraging that shepherd to connect with God in the way that he thought was the best way possible. Moses thought that the way that he had practiced and worshiped his faith, his communion with God, should be the way that everyone should practice it. But as God reminded him, every person has their own path. And so the story finishes by another day passes by and Moses runs into the shepherd again. But this time, instead of saying all those things, the shepherd is much more calm, much more relaxed. And Moses finds this demeanor very agreeable, but he's also very surprised. So he approaches the shepherd one more time and asks, what has caused this change? Just a few days ago, I saw you and you were connecting and with God in such a different manner. Why are you now all of a sudden changing that? And the shepherd said, I have you to thank for that because you opened my eyes. Before I saw God just as this otherworldly human being, but now I see God as the force that lives within all of us. I see God as the one true being, the one true essence, the one true creator. And so as the story goes, both individuals realized something and grew from that. The shepherd realized that there is a much bigger way, a much more vast way of approaching and thinking about God. And Moses came away with that, learning that every person has their own way, every person has their own practice. And that just because he had attained a level of spiritual insight or a level of connection with God, he shouldn't try to impose that onto others. In fact, that's one thing I tell everyone is no matter where you are, no matter who you are, no matter what you do, never, ever, ever discourage someone from practicing spirituality in the way that they see fit. You can talk to them, you can share your ideas, you can show them what you're doing. But at the end of the day, you have to respect their own beliefs, their own viewpoints. And if they're connecting with God at the end of the day, even if it's different from how you connect with God, how you practice spirituality, at least they are trying to do the right thing. And so often I see this, and it really breaks my heart. So often I see this where someone has that desire, they have that yearning to truly develop as a spiritual being. But unfortunately, someone or a group of people discourages them to the point where they feel hopeless. They feel dumb. They feel like they can never grasp that. And they get discouraged altogether. And to me, that is just such a terrible way of going about it. I see this a lot, unfortunately, in some circles where everything is by the book. And if one thing is slightly off, you're thrown into that bucket. That bucket of not being a believer, the bucket of not being of a particular group or a particular faith or a particular walk of life, and you kind of become ostracized. And to me, it's all about how can we all work together? How can we all help one another? Instead of discouraging each other, we should encourage each other. We should be one another's allies. We should be one another's friends and support one another. When one of us falls, the other picks us up, and vice versa. So going back to that story of Moses and the shepherd, both of them walked away with some incredible level of knowledge and insight that helped them on their journeys. And I believe that's how it should be in life. But it starts with you as the person that is trying to grow, as the person that is trying to evolve, to have that understanding, to sort of quiet the ego within, to be comfortable with differences and conflict and contrast, because a lot of us aren't. We don't like something that is contradicting what we believe in. And for some strange reason, we believe that it threatens or it impacts or it endangers our viewpoint, and by extension, our essence, our existence. Nothing could be further from the truth, though. Conflict, disagreements, if handled respectfully, if handled with maturity, can lead to an immense level of growth. And what happens if you are the recipient of this, right? What happens if you now all of a sudden kind of let go of trying to be right, trying to prove how your way of living is the best way, but someone else that you encounter or that you live with or that you deal with on a daily basis is trying so hard to impose their way of living to you? And the advice is the same, right? The suggestion is the same: to tolerate, to let that person express themselves. As long as you can listen, as long as you can be a sort of a space, an open and a safe space for them to express how they're feeling, how they're thinking, how they're approaching their own life, that will do more good than you trying to argue with them, to bait them, to become defensive, even if the other person started it, right? So, I know we examined, the topic of this video is to not impose your views on others, but it could equally be also about not becoming defensive when others try to impose their viewpoint onto you. To be able to treat that with calm, with patience, with almost sympathy, if you think about it, with compassion. Because even though they might not, in your view, be doing the right things or practicing the right things, if you have that compassion, if you have that understanding, well, then you've already achieved what you needed to achieve. In fact, I think that's one of the greatest testaments of spiritual growth, is that you can keep on growing even if others find your way strange, even if others might not necessarily agree. Because if you're constantly questioning yourself, if you're constantly questioning your path, then maybe you haven't yet developed the conviction in God to know that the path you're on is the right path for you. Right? So I think that's where, if I'm to kind of summarize the core of this video, is to be and let others be. Right? Navigate all the differences. Because at the end of the day, when you strip everything down to the most fundamental essence, we're all the same. It's always been that way, and it always will be. But through years of mental conditioning, through years of societal influences, through years of insecurity, immaturity, not growing as a person, we've come to believe that these differences mean everything. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what labels you have. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. We're all human. We're all children of God. We're all the creations of God. And we all have one common goal, which is to return back to God, which is to make the most of this life, this precious time that we have, to make that ultimate realization, to make that U-turn, right? To not be kind of going blindly in the path of just kind of wading through life without really understanding its ultimate purpose. That, I think, if we can all carry that understanding with us, then no viewpoint will be able to kind of shake us off that pedestal of calm, of peace, of tranquility. People will ultimately, if they want to, if they are ready, if they have done and put in the self-work, they will sort of open their eyes themselves. The greatest thing you can do for someone is to be that space. Your words are one way to help people, but your demeanor and how you treat them is perhaps the most powerful tool and weapon that you have. So don't mistake your sort of spiritual understanding, your spiritual maturity as being insufficient. Don't believe that it requires clever reasoning and argumenting to convince another person. And don't ever feel the need that you have to convince another person. Even if no one in this world agrees with what you are doing, if your heart, if your intuition is giving you that feedback that, yes, this feels right, this is what's ultimately connecting me with who I really am, then you don't need to worry about anyone else. You just wish them well and be on your way. So with that, I appreciate you for taking some time to watch this video. I know it's a topic that sometimes gets overlooked, perhaps doesn't get the coverage it deserves, but hopefully it sheds some light on a very important area of our spiritual growth, of our spiritual journey. If you like this video and want more videos like this that really hone on how we can grow as human beings in this spiritual realm, in the spiritual um, existence, then please check out some of the other videos on this channel. As you all can see, I've been working really hard over the past 3 and 4 years to really develop this channel and make it a resource for people from all walks of life, from all faiths, from all backgrounds, ages, etc., to connect with themselves, to discover their ultimate purpose in life, and ultimately to come into a better relationship with God. I believe that these videos are compatible with anyone's viewpoints. That's why I try not to, I try to pull from so many different sources, from so many different trees of understanding, if you will, because I think at the end of the day, that's what makes life so beautiful and so unique. But with that, I appreciate you for taking some time to watch this video. Please give a like. That definitely helps the YouTube algorithm and helps other people who want to discover this content come across it. And please also subscribe as well. I try to make it a conscious effort to produce a video every week. And as long as God will let me, that will certainly be my goal going forward, is to keep doing that, keep providing new content, keep providing new information that can not only be educational, but also inspirational as well. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day and week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you next time.